Every Night is Game Night preview series, episode 14, Coma Ward, with the designer Danny Lott. Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to the preview series, and this is actually a very, very special week for us in that we have gone beyond weekly. We are dropping 2 preview series this week. There's so much good stuff on Kickstarter, and so many designers that are willing to come on the show, interact with me, interact with the community, and let us know behind the screen, under the hood, what is going on with their Kickstarter projects. We hope you are enjoying it. So first up this week, we have Coma Ward, a psychological thriller game. So you're not here for combat, you're not here for a rousing good time, you are here for an emotional experience, an experience that gets into your head, hopefully gets into your psyche. Think Betrayal at House on the Hill, that kind of game, only a little bit more streamlined and a lot more emotionally charged as, well, that's the hope of the designer anyway. We'll get into that in a minute. Before we get into the interview though, I wanted to give a disclaimer because we have an audience that expects solo, at least a lot of our audience. So just want to put it out there that this game does not play solo out of the box. That is not part of the original design, but they hope to have some stretch goal content which will address the solo audience. So I figured, why not? I'm going to bring him on anyway because I'm really looking forward to this game. So without further ado, I've let this man wait long enough. So I'd like to welcome to the show first-time designer Danny Lott. Welcome, buddy.
Thanks for having me on. I'm very excited, Jason.
Oh, this will be so much fun. Although I was ninja'd, you've already popped your podcast cherry with the Board Game Design Lab.
I did. Gabe was a very, very, very gracious host, and he treated me very well, like a lady. So I'm very happy.
So on that podcast, I really enjoy Gabe's work. I actually appeared on the podcast as well, so I'm not just kissing up to Gabe. He talks a lot about the horror elements of it, so we're going to refer... you cannot talk about this game without talking about horror. We'll get to that in a second, but we will refer back to that conversation, so I definitely do want to encourage you guys to listen to good old Gabe on Board Game Design Lab. But here, let's get personal. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your journey as a game designer and what I know, right? That's the hardest, most horrifying thing. Oh my God. Let's talk about you and your journey and what led you to developing this game.
Sure. So I was a teacher many a moon ago, and I loved what I did, but I fell out of love with what it had become. I was teaching kindergarten, and it was all about the kids, and it was great. Then I was teaching 5th grade, and it became less about the kids and more about the test results, and I didn't feel it was impactful, so I left. And I wanted to start Central Florida's premier board game cafe, The Game Shelf. But through a series of learning about business partners being not always what you expect, that transitioned into something else, and I, in the process, found myself designing board games, and many of them were terrible. My first one was called Cool, and it was this awful party game that had these little elements of like unique card placement and take that elements, and it was very much like someone took Munchkin and made it worse. And it wasn't a proud moment, but it was a first step. And so from there, I had a few other things that I'd done. I played a lot with Magic Set Editor as a program, and that really helped me find my space. And then I made a little worker placement game about designing dresses for my wife's birthday, and she loved it. And it showed really well at a prototype event that I was at. So I also was like, I've been working on this little horror thing, and I'd been trying to write a bunch of movie scripts, and they all kind of fell through because I didn't understand how dialogue worked. It was very much like I'd written a bunch of the Asylum Presents films, and they're already at quota for Shark Attack movies, so they don't need my help. So I transitioned those into board game elements, showed it to a friend of mine, Matt Holden, the head of the IGA, and he got me in touch with Everything Epic, and here we are. This is my journey.
Yeah. And Jim was on the show a couple weeks ago, and he told a story about how you demoed the game for him, and it gave him nightmares, like legit nightmares. And he's like, okay, any game that does that, I have to sign. So let's cool, man. That's a really awesome journey, especially, going from game store owner and having to wade in those waters. And now it's just like, now you're in the nice, calm, peaceful waters of game design. So welcome.
Thanks.
So cool. So let's get into Coma Ward. So Coma Ward, like I said, I heard about this game. I think it was like right at the beginning of the year when like the year lists are coming out and these are the games I'm looking for. And I'm like, oh wow, this is different. Yeah. This is not something that I'm going to see every day. And I'm a psychotherapist. So that kind of like, I'm not a horror guy necessarily, but I am a psychodrama guy. So it just, things kind of leapt out about this game that were really interesting. So, you know, I know some of my mechanics fans out there are going to be like, okay, let's get to the mechanics already. But I think with this game, probably perhaps more than most, we have to understand what you're doing thematically in order to really understand the mechanics. So let's get into a little bit of how you approached the horror theme of Coma Ward.
Sure. So when I was designing Coma Ward, there were a few things I wanted to do. I'd played lots. I mean, Arkham Horror is what got me into the hobby, so I played a tremendous amount of Arkham Horror. I've always been a big horror fan. I remember watching Species when I was 4 and made me never want to kiss a woman. And then I learned that maybe you don't show 4-year-old Species and their love map's not screwed up. And then I saw it when I was 5, and that just, you know, Tim Curry, that'll ruin you. So I've always had a fascination with horror since a young age. So I fell in love with the Trail at House on the Hill as well. And my game group never wanted to play those games because they were clunky or unstreamlined or predictable or you could memorize them. And it just, they were overburdened with gears in a motor that didn't need as many mechanisms. And so part of the reason that I designed Coma Ward is I thought to myself, okay, I have these stories I want to tell. I have a game group that wants to play games that tell stories, but they don't like the way games do that. Well, I'll just fix it. And so that's what birthed Coma Ward, was a desire to make a storytelling game that was component light, mechanic focused, and narrative driven. So we managed to stay narrative driven and mechanic focused, but Everything Epic loves to put some flash in games. So component light, we did not stay.
Okay. So horror. Right.
Yes.
Again, I don't want to steal away from Gabe. I'm sure you covered this theme a lot in his podcast, but I just want to harp on the point that horror for a lot of people is like blood and gore and like the monster behind the door, blah, or you know, Freddy and Jason, you know, like the really overt type, you know, stuff. And then
here's Cthulhu. Look at him. Look at Cthulhu. See Cthulhu. You can punch him. You can beat him. Yeah.
Yeah, or like, you know, Saw, which is, I think, like the apotheosis of like that blood and gore stuff. You're going for a very different approach here, so maybe you could break that down for us. Sure.
So gore needs to exist in horror, but it's how you use it. So we're very afraid of what's inside of us, both metaphorically and literally. Like, they're called innards because they need to be there. But we're also afraid of the things inside us that drive us psychologically that we can't predict, as well as there's these, I mean, Carl Jung referred to it as the saurian tale. There's these shadows, these ancient primordial things that still drive us to the brink of insanity. Babies are still afraid of the dark. Adults are still afraid of the dark. These are natural, rational fears. The first stories were horror stories. And so for me, horror is not about that which harms you. It's about that which takes away your power. We live in a world of empowerment, fantasy, and control and choice, but these are all illusions we've manufactured. I mean, everything that I can do on my computer is great, but it's a simulation of a simulation. It's plastic and glass. They're these little finite constructs we perfectly manipulate and control, but the actual reality of it is they are meaningless, and I am but a speck in the cosmic sandstorm that means nothing. And coming to grips with that realization is absolutely terrifying. That's why we do everything we can to ignore it. So when you're put in a situation where you're forced to face the reality of your own insignificance, and every action you take is ultimately futile, but it comes with this momentary potential of genuine purpose. That's to me what horror is. It's the scene in Alien where Ripley is hiding in a corner, clutching a gun, trying not to make a sound because she knows she's practically dead. It's The event, and it's the moment in Event Horizon where, I don't know, I'm doubling down on sci-fi horror, but whatever. It's the moment in Event Horizon where they see the absolute chaos and insanity that this world they opened through light speed reveals. It's the moment in Hellraiser when you opened the lament contraption and you realize you are nothing and a world of infinity expands beyond you. That is true terror. And to experience that, you have to put a little work in. Or you can be lazy, splash some blood on the screen, throw me some guts, and say, hey, it's a spooky. Oh, don't look here. It's a ghost.
Yeah, I mean, to me, horror is, to get closer to the theme, it's Nurse Ratched.
Yes.
I know that, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't know how many of you have seen it. Go see it. I mean, it's a funny movie. It's a suspenseful movie. But Nurse Ratched, I feel my manhood shrinking whenever I see that woman. Speaking of powerlessness, and that's so transitioning a little bit to theme integration. You write a really good designer diary about this because, like, you're talking about disempowerment, right? But games are about empowerment. Games are, we want, we've had a couple of adventure games. We even had Jim on his adventure game. You start little and you gain and you get bigger and you can do bigger and better things, right? Mm-hmm. So we're all about growing and finding and being capable. In your game though, there's nothing. Like, you have nothing. Like, how did you manage to navigate those waters of, like, giving players nothing and just saying go?
It took some work. The initial designs of Coma Ward were not well received. But fortunately, I have good friends who gave great feedback. And what I found was the best way to make players feel as though they have something, but ultimately realizing it's nothing, is to give them small goals. So in Coma Ward, we've got these neuroses strips, and they're used to, because in Coma Ward, I didn't want your character to have a gender or a race that you didn't project. I want you to completely imagine your character however you want them to be. So if you want to be a 12-year-old African-American girl, fine. If you want to be a 25-year-old Caucasian male, great. I don't care. That's however you envision your character. Play the game. But we needed to give some sort of direction, and so we did that through neuroses. These little ways that people reacted under the stress. And as your focus decreases and your terror increases, your neuroses becomes more pronounced. And so you'll start out as, let's say, caring, and then you'll become controlling, and then you'll become overbearing. And you get rewarded for making certain choices while you're in that level of neuroses. So if you're caring, you get rewarded for giving an item to someone. If you're controlling, you can help someone with a check. You can choose the result of one of their dice. And then if you're overbearing, you get rewarded if you move into a tile with someone, just like following them. And so that doesn't really change the game. It doesn't help you interact with the game better. It doesn't give you better dice rolls. It doesn't make you more powerful at attacking. But it encourages you to make certain choices. And if someone else has opposing neuroses abilities, for instance, they're suspicious, they don't want to be around other people, and then they become paranoid, they question your choices, your two micro goals are now in opposition. But you want to follow your micro goal because it gives you a modicum of reward. It gives you a breadcrumb. And that breadcrumb is nothing against the giant monster that lays inside the phenomenon envelope or the horrible revelation in there. But it distracts you long enough while you're discovering that.
Actually, so let me take a step back and bring the mechanics folks back in. So just to kind of give a sense for how the game flows so that we can talk about this theme stuff and how it integrates. So you said Arkham Horror and Betrayal at House in the Hill, but that those are the two games that Jim took as inspirations for his game. So how do you take those two games and bring them alive in your game?
Great question. So with Secrets of the Lost Tomb and Secrets of the Lost Station, you are exploring to find a specific goal. You know what the scenario is ahead of time, and that's how it is in Arkham Horror. In Coma Ward, you are exploring never knowing what the goal is going to be. In Secrets, you always know, whether it's Station or Tomb, you almost always know it's cooperative. You're always working together. But in Coma Ward, you don't know that for a fact. So that's where I got the inspiration from Betrayal. But the other thing is the dice system. You don't know what's going to happen in a tile in Coma Ward. When you enter that room, you have to check your focus, and you can find an item card, or if you fail that focus check, a hallucination card. Every tile in Secrets has a consistent result. If I search in this one room, I get plus a lore, because this is the smart person room. Or if I search in this room, I get plus a item card, because this is the armory. Sure, there are consistent rooms in Coma Ward, like when you find the staff lockers, you're going to reveal cards from the item deck until you hit a clue or a clothing item. But after that happens, you might not find another item. You might lose your mind in that room and see a hallucination of yourself already exploring the room. So the choices that I made from inspiration from Arkham Horror and Coma Ward were more influenced by the meta game of the table. How do you as a person make decisions? Whereas I think Secrets are more about character driven. How would your character interact in this room?
Okay, that makes sense. So getting to that, you mentioned the hallucinations. I found those really, really interesting. It's basically the quote unquote event deck. Like a lot of these games have an event deck, but you guys did something really interesting with it. So maybe you could break down how hallucinations work.
Sure. So when you enter a room and you search, or if you rummage a room, you search a room that's already been discovered, and you check your focus. If you fail, the player to your left draws a hallucination card. And they all have an event, a kind of byline on them. So it could be like a shadowy figure stands before you, or a baby cries from inside the room. And then you're going to get 3 choices. So for that baby crying, you can leave, turn on the lights, or enter blindly. Now, there are multiple copies of that card in the deck, and they all offer the same byline and the same choices, but your result will be different. So, for instance, if you choose to turn the lights on, for instance, we were playing the other day, and a baby cried in the room, and my friend said, you know what, I'm going to turn the lights on. And he had to make a dexterity check, and he passed it with flying colors. But this figure darted past him, and when he turned to follow them, they were gone, and so his terror went up, but he was really focused because now he was on edge. So his next time he made a focus check, he was hyper prepared. But another time, my wife got the same. A baby cries in a room, and she chose, I'm going to turn the lights on. And what she saw was this horrible, grisly scene. And then as she was starting to recoil from that, she blinked, and it was gone. And in its place, she found an item. And so each choice you make can have... even the same choice can have an entirely different result.
So another game that's kind of lighting at least the solo community game, and a lot of people, it's a $2 million Kickstarter, so you can't get away from it. It's Seventh Continent. So Seventh Continent, I don't know if you're familiar with that game.
Vaguely.
Okay, so it's an open world game where the person starts in the middle of like one little square and they just don't know what's going on. They don't really know why they're there. They have this vague general sense of like, okay, I need to uncurse myself, but they don't define the curse. They don't. So it's very kind of open-ended, and it's very like kind of meditative. There's barely any combat. There's it's all like kind of skill checky and things happening. So is that the kind of vibe you were going for? Like this kind of like very sedate, I'm not sedate, but like just, not daring and adventurous, but you're just really kind of this, it's hard to describe. So maybe you can put a word to what the vibe was you're going for.
Sure. I wanted more cerebral. Like they're called hallucination cards because they are your mind coping with maybe the hospital's haunted, maybe you're insane, maybe you're being experimented on by aliens. And so because there's so many different possible phenomenon that could be the factor in you being in this hospital and you losing your mind, there could just be so many playful ways to explore that. So I wanted something cerebral and diverse and let me play with horror tropes in a unique way. That's what I was going for.
So Betrayal at House on the Hill it's an obvious analog to the game. We haven't talked about the phenomenon yet, how the phenomenon kind of changes the rule of the game. So maybe you can go into a little bit more about the phenomenon.
The phenomenon of Coma Ward, that was one of the most interesting things to design. So in Coma Ward, the first half of the game is usually very similar. It's the prologue, you're exploring, you're finding rooms, you're searching for clues. But when you find those clues, then the game truly reveals itself. And you go inside, you look in to see the order of the clues that you discovered and what order you discovered them in, and a chart will tell you which phenomenon to reveal. And you take this tuck box out and you open it, and it's got a strip in it that tells you the rules. Now, unlike Betrayal at House on the Hill, you don't say, oh, okay, we're doing the zombie one. Jason, you're the zombie. You get the bad guy book. You go in the other room. We're going to talk about how we're going to beat you for 30 minutes. You sit in the corner and read by yourself. Okay. With this, everyone hears the story at the same time. Everyone gets the exact same rules for play. So the phenomenon that we've been using for all of our demonstrative stuff, all of our demo games and the playthrough for the Kickstarter video is a lucid nightmare. And every character is having a nightmare they've been having for years. And this time you're going to take control of your dream and you're going to stop the nightmare. So everyone gets a specific goal card, which tells you what your version of the nightmare is and what you need to do to win. And then there's also this deck of nightmare cards that each turn you're going to roll a focus check, and depending on the number of successes you get determines how many nightmares are going to basically walk into the hospital. And the nightmares can't be defeated. In a lot of phenomenon, the adversaries you encounter, there are ways to best them, but you can't beat nightmares. They're just, your subconscious doing whatever it does. So when the Tooth Fairy bubbles out of the stairs as this gnashing maw of a feminine face, it's there, and you either go in the stairs or you don't. And so gradually, as everybody's losing their focus, trying to resolve their goals, more and more complex and horrifying monstrosities are just piling and piling into the hospital. So each phenomenon is different, though. So in that one, it's entirely independent. My goal might be to just get to a specific room, pass a certain check, and if I do, I win, you all lose, haha, I won my nightmare. It might be, I think that all of you are demons, and I have to kill one of you so that I can rip your face off and prove that you're demons to each other, and then I win. So we have these contradicting goals, but in other phenomenon, it could be, like I said, there's these adversaries that we can defeat, and it's co-op. Maybe the hospital's under some sort of attack and we're legitimately just coma patients, or maybe the world was ravaged by some disease and we were the lucky few who were immune to it, and now we have to make sure we're inoculated, all the while those who are slowly dying of the disease are trying to invade us and steal our blood so they can survive. It could be anything. And that's where I think we set ourselves apart from Betrayal, in that it all happens in that moment of the talk box being opened, and that moment of the individual information being revealed. Because everyone gets all their information at once, but not everyone gets the same information. And play just goes. There's maybe 5 minutes of setup, and then you're just back in the game. And that, I don't think there's been something done as concisely in the world of board games.
Yeah, you still have dice. You still have skill checking for resolutions. And when a lot of gamers think of dice, they just it's like they're like, some people love dice, and there's there's reasons why they should be in the game. But some people just think like, oh, it's just, I'm just giving up myself to the fates. It's just all random. And like a game Betrayal of the House on the Hill in particular, like I've heard a lot of people give the criticism that like, oh, well, it doesn't matter what my choices are anyway, because the dice are just going to tell me whether I can do or not do. And, the game basically plays me because of what I have to do for skill checks. Like, I got a character with slow speed. I had a bunch of speed checks. And so, that kind of thing. So how did you address those issues in Coma Ward?
Sure. So first of all, there has to be dice in Coma Ward. You can't have a horror game with consistent variables. Then it's not terrifying and it becomes predictable. So if you are a person that likes predictability, don't play Coma Ward. You don't know what the game's going to be halfway through. I'm sorry, you're not the target demographic. And if you like the idea, either compromise and play the game with uncertainty or don't. I'm not going to make a game with uncertainty that has control that doesn't exist. You're a paradox. Stop telling me what to do. But as for how we dealt with that in the dice, so there are times in Coma Ward where you'll have a single die in your focus. Your focus will be 1, but there's still a chance for you to succeed on a focus check. Because in Coma Ward, we have 6-sided dice. When you roll only a 5 and a 6, count as success. And for a general focus check, you need 3 successes. But if you roll a 4, you get to re-roll that 4 and another die. A lot of people call it the exploding dice mechanism because we've seen people start with 3 dice on a check and end the check with 7 successes because they just kept getting 4s and rolling more and more dice. And so it's called suspense because it emulates that moment of the hand creeping towards the doorknob as the background music just crescendos and grows, and the shadows creeping in from the outside as the dolly zoom pans in on that single moment, and you don't know what's going to happen. And so that's what we were going for in that. Yes, there's dice, but there's always a chance. Sure, it's really just the illusion of chance because that's how good horror works, and I'm a sadistic, evil person as a designer, but there's still a chance.
Okay. So that criticism that in terms of I guess not the predictability, but the idea that the game is playing me. Like I do a thing and the dice just told me that I can't do that thing. I have to do this other thing. So how are we able to kind of give players agency? Like that's all they have at the end of the day, right? All they have is their own agency in a game like this. They don't have anything else. They don't have information. They don't have powers. They don't have items. Right. They have items, but like they probably a scalpel or something. It's not like
a scalpel, bedpan, some jeans. So, I mean, the hallucination cards are definitely one way around that avenue, and so you can choose when you encounter, I failed my roll, but I still have this card, and most of the hallucination cards, one of the choices, or multiple of the choices, will give you a positive, even though you failed, quote, that check. The other thing is, okay, yes, the dice are playing you, but at the end of the day, all I did was design a framework. You bought the product. If you don't like the way it plays, here's a little secret. It's not a video game. You can play it any way you want. You're not locked in by code in a controller. So, I know there's this phrase of, the designer's true intentions. I'll tell you what my true intentions are. You to have a good time. And if the way that I wrote the game doesn't please you and you have a fix for it, just play it that way. I'm not going to be offended. So I feel bad because I can't answer your question because at the end of the day, my answer's going to be, well, yeah, you don't get to play life either.
Right. Got it.
I mean, at the end of the day, we have the illusion of free will, but neurologically speaking, those decisions are made before we're consciously aware of those decisions. So I can give you the illusion of choice all day long, but then we're going to play a Euro game and you're always going to make the, quote, optimum choice, which means we're not really playing a game. We're racing to make the best choice. And that's called work. And I don't want to work when I play games.
Yeah, I know, right? Okay, cool. So let's get back to the hallucination card. It seems like, so in a game like this, the hallucination cards or the event deck is, it's very important. And so in terms of the replayability of the game, I think that a lot of it lies in, having a nice fat event deck and having a nice fat set of scenarios. So how much content are we going to get in Coma Ward?
That is a great question. So on the onset, the preliminary, we just barely make funding. That's it. We're only able to reach our goal of 30,000. The core game will have 8 phenomenon. Now, each phenomenon has great amounts of variability. For instance, the one that I was talking about earlier, there's 6 different goal cards. So if you're playing a 6-player game, you have a 1 in 6 chance of getting the same goal again. If the first time you play it, you only play 3 players, well, crap, there's just a crud ton of variability there. So each of the phenomenon will have high levels of replayability. However, if we are able to reach certain stretch goals, we're just going to start cramming phenomenon in there. Because I've written and designed over 20 phenomenon. So the core game has 8. The expansion has 6. For each stretch goal we reach, that's just more phenomenon. In the expansion, more phenomenon in the base game. And we've talked about potentially, let's say we don't reach the funding goal for whatever reason, selling the phenomenon as independent expansions, kind of like Time Stories a little bit. And then I believe I've got to double check my math here. Hold on. I think we're starting out with more than 50 hallucination cards. 61 hallucination cards.
Cool. So my last question is solo. Yeah, well, out of the box, it doesn't look like it's going to support solo, but I think that is an intention. If I read Chris on a forum, said that, depending on how it goes and further development and stretch goals and all that kind of thing, that they were going to look to explore the possibility. So is that something that you're thinking about, or where are we at with that?
The design of Coma Ward makes it difficult for solo because of the hallucination cards. You can't know what your options are. You have to have that uncertainty. So having an app where a narrator of sorts could read you your hallucination cards and provide you your choices, that would be a way we could circumvent that. Emphasizing certain cooperative phenomenon as soloable would be a way to incorporate that. The main issue with that is apps are not cheap. Yeah. So we have discussed, as a very high-level stretch goal, doing an app of sorts. There is someone who does have voiceover experience that's very familiar with all of the text of Coma Ward and the design and the intended inflection. So that is definitely something we are capable of doing with the talent that we have, but not necessarily with the funding unless we reach some lofty stretch goals.
Okay, so not completely out of the question, but it's definitely like this game was made for interaction.
Yes.
Yeah. This game was not just like the interaction of people the characters interact and the people are interacting. So there's like that multi-level interaction going on which has to be in a psychological game.
Exactly. And for instance, one of the mechanics we have for recurring players, like people who've played more than once, is quirk cards. And the quirk cards will allow you to watch players as they are playing the game, and you get rewarded for observing behavior that they have. So like one of them is called trichophilia. Whenever somebody touches their hair, you put a counter on your quirk card. And so they watch you do that, and they're like, what did I do? What am I doing? Because once the phenomenon starts, if you've got a certain number of counters on your quirk card, you get an ongoing bonus. So like the trichophilia is you get +1 strength forever. And anytime you're on a tile with somebody and they trade with you, you both get -1 terror. And so like they don't want you to have that ability if it's a competitive phenomenon. So they're going to start watching their behavior and trying to act differently, or they might get rewarded for making you laugh or sigh. So they might intentionally make a bunch of like dad jokes to just really grind your gears. And so you can't enjoy the quirk cards by yourself. I mean, I guess you could. Maybe there's a design challenge there.
Yeah, so I mean, we haven't closed the door on it, especially like the Kickstarter thing. It's like, the people just love it, and I think that even a game like Betrayal at House on the Hill, like people, they solo that. Like they just want a good story, right. And a good engine for a good story. Like, people solo time stories, people solo like any narrative experience. Like, they love reading books, but they want something a little bit more interactive that kind of generates a story for you. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that as long as there's attention paid to that, I think people are going to be happy. And, you build up enough goodwill and people are like, okay, they're working on it. And, I think that's sufficient. So, yeah, is there that's all my questions. Is there anything else that you want to share about the game before we sign off?
I would share one story, but I already shared it on Gabe's podcast, so I'm not going to say that one. I do want to say, I just have to speak so highly. I am very fortunate to have worked with Everything Epic as publishers. A lot of game designers who would even attempt a design as ambitious and stupidly large as Coma Ward would have to go it alone, because it's such a just clunky and awkward concept. And I've been so fortunate to have Everything Epic help us with that process, and that all happened because of the IGA. And so if you're an independent game designer listening to this and you're not familiar with the Indie Game Alliance, look into them. They have their efforts, and Everything Epic have made it where this crazy, far-off, ridiculous, failed Hollywood script amalgam of a dream I have is actually viable. And so if you have an opportunity and a dream and an ambition and a design, always look outward for resources, because if I had to do this alone, I would probably have given up long ago.
cool, man. So yeah, thank you very, very much for joining us. That was Danny Lott. His game is Coma Ward, and the publisher is Everything Epic Games. It's going to be live on Kickstarter by the time you hear this podcast. So good luck to Danny, and good luck to all you guys who are back in the thing. I hope that this podcast is giving you enough information to take you off the fence. If not, then you can always hit up Danny, and I'm sure he'll be just like anybody else, active on those Kickstarter forums, right?
Oh yeah.
I can't wait. All right. So that'll do it for another episode of the preview series. We are going to be back in a couple of days for another story driven adventure. So please stay tuned for that. Until then, later everybody.